Hi, I'm Miss Mare.
And I'm Miss Andrea. And this is CheesePress. But we haven't done a proper tea time in some time. And so we're going to do that today.
Indeed.
What we are going to do is we're going to react to a video that I've not watched.
We have not
yet.
watched this.
There's just been some buzz about it.
The title, though.
I don't know who Rachel Wilson is, but Rachel Wilson schools feminists against homeschooling. I don't know how I feel.
I'm going to reserve judgment till we see the video.
I don't even know if I'm a feminist, so here we are. I have tendencies.
I feel like I'm a feminist.
I definitely have tendencies. I didn't until I looked at my daughter and said, oh no, she's an adult woman. And I checked myself.
I accept that.
All right, so let's do it.
This is an interesting looking panel.
It's a very multicultural panel.
But
ready?
they all look like they're, just visually, they all look like they're similar socioeconomic class.
Definitely.
They all look
young,
like they're the same age
beautiful
group.
young women.
They look like they travel all in the same circles. Definitely not our generation.
I'm always interested in what people are saying to
Right?
people my children's age.
Also fair.
So let's make that a little bit bigger.
Yep.
And hit go.
Hear your viewpoint on if you think that homeschooling education is better or public school education is better, and why so.
Well, it's kind of funny you ask, because I have been homeschooling the kids for many years now. I did a little guest spot on Tucker Carlson's show when he was still on Fox to talk about the big spike in homeschooling during the pandemic. Statistically, homeschooled students do better overall in pretty much every metric compared to public school students.
So I'm going to jump in here from editing just to give you context on who we're watching and who was talking. So Rachel Wilson is an Orthodox Christian, a wife, mother of 5 children, and a homeschooling advocate. Hence her social media moniker, Based Homeschool Mom. Wilson is the author of the new book, Occult Feminism. This is from 2022. The Secret History of Women's Liberation, and is also a licensed firearms instructor. The young women in the video are from a group called California Boss Babes. Boss Babe refers to an online community primarily focused on empowering female entrepreneurs, with its most prominent figures being Natalie Ellis and Danielle Canty, who co-founded the platform and host the Boss Babe podcast. Essentially, Boss Babe feminists are women actively participating in this community, aiming to build their business and support other women in doing the same. Key points about Boss Babe. They focus on female entrepreneurship. The platform primarily targets women looking to start or grow their own business. They're into community building. A major aspect of Boss Babe is creating a supportive network for women to connect, share experiences, and learn from each other. The community is primarily based online, with a strong presence on social media platforms like Instagram. The main criticism about Boss Babes and the Boss Babe brand is that it promotes a narrow definition of female success, often centering around wealth and appearance.
I think that there's a lot of big problems with public schooling now. Not that it was...
Hold on, because you said...
Well, don't straight out lie. We think homeschooling's amazing.
Right.
But you can't just blanket statement that homeschoolers do better in just about every metric, because it's not true. Mostly because of how people are defining homeschooling with this huge blanket, but also because if you're not doing homeschooling from a very purposeful, I can't think of the word.
Rigorous?
No, just intentional. If you're not being very intentional about homeschooling, you're not going to get the results.
I accept that statement. Yeah, and I'm generally not a huge fan of blanket statements, but when done correctly, when homeschooling with a purpose, it is true that homeschool students do perform better than traditionally schooled students. I believe the reason for that is that we know that one of the few things that can actually affect educational outcome is student to teacher ratio. You get wide variety. Like if you study educational policy.
And mediocre teacher focused on one child is going to be better than the best teacher focused on 30 kids.
Yes.
You just are.
And that's like when you get into studying educational systems and educational policy, you have incredible outcomes from schools that are super high pressure and they give all of this work and kids are studying until 2:00 in the morning and countries have to pass laws that you can't have a tutoring center open after midnight. And you also have excellent results from countries where school days are extraordinarily short and they don't take any work home with them and they just really focus on family time and they really focus on developing and growing kids. And so you have these diametric opposites that all have great educational outcomes. The one consistent is student to teacher ratio. When you have many adults and fewer students, you're going to get a better educational outcome. And I think that that's what happens when homeschooling is done intentionally.
Never great. If you look into the history of public schooling and why it was started and who started it, it was never really about learning or making people smarter or preparing them for adult life. It was more so about preparing good little cogs in the wheel who were going to follow the values of the state, whatever the government wanted kids to do. And it was based on the Prussian school system, which was to make good soldiers for Prussia. So I think Andrew's really spot on when he says school is not for smart people. I think that's correct. I think there's lots.
Her history's a little off.
That's interesting.
Her history's a little off.
Well,
a little. You need that grain of truth to make it believable.
You need the grain of truth to make it believable.
All right, so when we made this video, I said that the Prussian model of education had nothing to do with the formation of public education. That's wrong. The Prussian model absolutely started the conversation. Went down the rabbit trail, started doing a whole bunch of research to fact check the wild things that were being said in this video. And the Prussian model is the first one that kind of gives people this idea that, government can educate people and people from all socioeconomic classes should be educated. Those are the things that are coming out of the Prussian model. It starts the conversation. Nobody adopts it because no other cultures have the same culture that the Prussian culture had at the time. However, it does absolutely begin the conversation about what public education might look like. So what's being said in the video we're reacting to has maybe a kernel of truth, but that's it.
I guess some of the ideas came out of Prussia, but our modern school system came from two sources, which is largely the Roman Catholic Church and the movement in industrialized England.
Well, that's where
to keep kids out of the factories.
But American public schools came out of the rich factory owners here. It's American industrialized.
So the
revolution.
Public school movement kind of rose all at the same time, and it was these conversations were happening amongst the theorists from a variety of sources. America was involved in it, but England was really the driving force. England and America were definitely trading notes.
Right.
A lot of the people, their motivations behind it actually were, we have kids that are being sent to the factories and they're dying in the factories, and let's keep the kids from dying.
England was at a point in their evolution where they were more or less taking a more moral high ground than we were in a lot of things in that time period.
But the policy people,
already.
The educational policy people here were very much in line with the British train of thought. And yes, did industrialists see an opportunity in a public school system? Absolutely. Did they then throw resources behind it? Absolutely. Did that change some of the conversation about how we're going to teach kids, how we're doing this? So yes, let's make sure that they are good members of society, that they are useful for our factories, that they can fit into this emerging, more skilled labor set that we have. Absolutely. Those are all parts of that conversation.
Well, and also their kids weren't in these schools.
No,
their kids were getting elite education so that they
Which was
could
different.
be these children's bosses.
And honestly, the Prussian education system, I feel like, is probably more elitist than mainstream.
Yeah.
But I haven't, because this is really the first time I've encountered a link between the Prussian education system and the modern public education system. So I have to read more on that.
Yeah.
Because that's not what I understand from the research that I've done and from everything. Public education was a tool for colonialism.
Well, you had to get people smart enough
Now, the
To be
element
workers.
but also the element of it being somewhat indoctrination is accurate. Not to even say that that's necessarily a bad thing.
That's the right word. I'm sorry, that's the right word.
No, but that's not even necessarily a bad thing. Stable cultures share core foundational ideas. And the public education system is a way to disseminate those core foundational ideas of whatever that culture happens to be.
That's true.
And if you happen to be, say, a British colonial power, and you want the people where you have
to be happy
your
with
colonies,
their lot in the world,
you want them to share those core values of British society, and so you're then going to educate them. You're going to teach them English. You're going to teach them to read and write. You're going to teach them to appreciate the fact that they're part of the British Commonwealth.
You're going to teach them the history of the victors so that you appreciate the victors and thank them for taking over your country.
And that's the same thing that the Catholic Church was doing. There is absolutely an element of indoctrination in public education, and some of that is necessary for stable societies.
Right.
If you wind up with a message that is out of step with the culture that is running the public education system, now you're going to have a problem. Now you're going to have a friction. If the culture says one thing and the educational system says something else, now you're going to get into
Or you're going to start getting dropouts and revolution.
Ways to socialize kids, and especially nowadays, there's homeschooling co-ops, homeschooling groups. There's more ways to connect and socialize than ever before. And like Andrew said, our kids can do all the sports and the extracurricular activities. They can go to tech center, vocational center, all that kind of stuff. So it really just gives you the freedom. And we have 5 kids, so each kid has their own strengths, their own weaknesses, their own personality, their own way they prefer to learn. One of the biggest weaknesses in public school is that you have to cater to the lowest common denominator. So if you're a little smarter, you might have a hard time. If you're somebody who has a different style of learning that's not really adaptable to public school, you're going to have a hard time. And especially boys, public school is really catered to girls. It's catered to girls doing stuff like sitting still, getting in line. My cat's freaking out over there. Andy's trying to he's trying to handle him. But so I much prefer homeschooling for a lot of reasons. We can get as much done in a day at homeschool in about 2 hours as the kids would learn.
More blanket statements.
Right.
Because my daughter was the one that struggled in public school. We realized when we were taking them out that my son didn't want to be there.
Right.
But
he fit in well.
Fit his personality.
Right.
She was the wild one.
In 7 hours of a regular school day. And I would say they retain a lot more of it, and there's no need for extra homework when you get home, things like that. So I'm a huge homeschooling advocate, and it's worked great for our family. I know that not every parent may be great at homeschooling, but not every parent's a great parent. There's always going to be some people who don't do well regardless of what we're talking about. So yeah, kind of where I would go with it.
Well, and not every teacher's good at teaching.
True.
But yeah.
I absolutely love your comment. I think it kind of bothered me initially because I didn't really like the generalization that, homeschooling's best for everyone. I think there are definitely special cases, just like you said, super geniuses or prodigies. They should be homeschooled and develop those talents and knowledge. But I think I went to public school, and then I also went to a small private school as well for high school. And I just found so much, or I feel like I learned so much in public schools and private schools. Not only kind of obviously I think if I was homeschooled, I may have known more. Oh, sorry. He's over here wrestling the cat. Oh, no worries. I feel like maybe that would have gotten me academically further, but I feel that the benefits, the socialization was enhanced, I guess, in a way in public schooling because, you're going to school every day and you're forced to socialize. So I feel like that grew my socialization skills. Whereas I feel that homeschooling, yes, you can, do activities like extracurriculars, but you're not seeing the same people every day because soccer practice is 3 times a week. But
I think there's a few things you're not thinking about. For example, most children's first exposure to violence is in a public school. Public schools are more prone to violence, child SA incidents happening than even private schools, churches, pretty much any other place. Schools are pretty dangerous on average now, and then you have all of the indoctrination with certain gender ideologies. Like, at least when I'm homeschooling my child, I know they're not going to come back a different gender, right? They were a girl that morning. I'm not going to put them on the bus and they're going to come back a boy.
So that's not how any of that works.
This is not going the way that this title is saying.
Well, no, I'm guessing now that I'm looking at this is the panel is Feminists Against Homeschooling. I'm assuming the guest is Rachel Wilson, and we are looking at her schooling these, but I have
Turning them off completely?
well,
By being a little preachy and very biased?
Okay. And not really accurate. I really want to hear from some of these other girls, though. That we've only heard from the one person.
Okay.
Boy. So there's that. And the other thing is that we've only had compulsory public education for about a century. All of human history prior to that, nobody had public school. Do you think that people weren't socialized? Of course they were. And one of the problems when we were talking about women in the workplace and working moms earlier, we used to have community everywhere throughout all of history. Children were raised by their mothers, but not just their mothers. All the women were at home with the kids. So mom had her sisters and her cousins and her neighbors and her friends who were all also raising their children. And so it was done all together. Everybody wasn't isolated. You didn't have little boy number 1 in high school, little daughter number 2 in junior high, and then mommy goes to work in her building and daddy goes to work in his building, and everybody's separated and atomized. And then we have to try to come back together for 2 hours at the end of the day before we all go to bed. The socialization thing was never a problem. It's only a problem now because the parents aren't home, the family's not around. All the women are in cubicles.
It's not a problem now either. That's a myth. Socialization is...
It's the biggest myth. I thought we were past this myth.
Well, apparently not.
Jeez Louise.
So everything has changed so much in a century that it is tough to talk about because all of you especially grew up in this modern world with the internet and with working parents and strong independent boss moms who told you that the most important thing to do was be ambitious and have a career, right? But I want to ask you guys a question. What do you think about this? So do you guys think that the feminists who came before you, or the strong independent women, your grandmas and your great grandmas, did they fight for the right to be career women and go to college? Is that something that you think they had to fight for that was worth fighting for? Maybe we'll just start over here and chair one and go around. Do you think that it was a good thing that women, did they fight for their right to work and be educated and be independent? And was that a good thing?
Yes, I think they did, and I think it was a good thing. Yeah.
What about number 2?
I agree. Yes, they did fight for it because they didn't get it in the past, and it is a good thing.
Okay, number 3?
I agree.
Same? Okay.
My family definitely did fight. I'm from Thailand, and a lot of jobs are either you're a farmer or you work for the government. So to them, school is very important, whether it's homeschooling or private school or public school. And I have a different viewpoint from my family completely because I don't think that people who can be successful and intelligent should always be in school. I have family members who never finished high school, even college, and they're thriving, making a lot of money because they have learned actual life skills, things that you are not taught when you're in school.
A good point. Okay, what about number 5?
I think my family did. I'd say overall it's a good thing, but I do think that some people didn't necessarily, they may have fought too for it, but maybe they weren't fighting for themselves, because I can recognize that plenty of people don't want to have to go do that, but nowadays you're expected to. So I think it's definitely a mixture.
What about you?
I think it's a mixture as well, but I think some women did fight to have a career.
Okay.
I would say yes. In India, it's at least back then or when my mom grew up, it wasn't always a guarantee you get an education. There's arranged marriage. You're expected to have children. She always wanted what's best for me, and she's always been pushing me to get an education, build a life for myself. So I agree that I think the fight was for good, and it is still good now. It's still applicable now. Wait, was the question whether women fought for our education or not, or if it was a good thing?
Do you think that women had to fight for the right to be able to have careers, and do you think that was good?
Her tone is really cheesing me off.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I guess historically women did fight. I'm kind of torn on the good or bad part because I do believe in equal opportunity, but I think it was overall a detriment to society that women were sent to work.
Okay, I'm going to follow that up with a second question. So if women fought for the right to work and have careers and be able to be independent, have their own money and have an education, do you think that it's a privilege for a woman to be able to stay home with her children? Like if I said, oh, well, I stay home with my kids and my husband works, would you say, well, not all women have that privilege? So I'm asking, is it a privilege to be a stay-at-home mom, or are you oppressed if you're a stay-at-home mom?
I think people would look at it both ways. Personally, I think it is a privilege because as we were talking about earlier, you know, like she also said just now, most women were forced to go to work, which they didn't want to. They wanted to stay home. So in that case, it would be a privilege. But then for other cases, it would be oppression. But I would think it was a privilege.
Number 2, what do you think?
I agree. I think it is a privilege for a woman to stay at home, but I also think it depends on the woman, whether or not you want to, like if the man is able to be the one providing.
Okay. What about 3?
I think if your husband makes enough to where you guys can do that, I think that's a pretty good thing. I think it's a privilege.
Okay. What about number 4?
I think if your husband is wealthy enough to support you and your entire family, and you can just stay at home, take care of your kids, like not really have to worry about making money yourself in your career, then that is a privilege.
Okay.
I think overall, I think it's a privilege. At the same time, I know that if I had a child, while I'd want to be able to stay home with them, and especially their more formative years, I also would need some sort of other work beyond just my kid, because I wouldn't want to just feel like I lost myself.
Okay, number 6.
Yeah, I think...
Sorry guys, I don't have your names here, so I'm just going by your chair number.
It always depends on the case, but I think it's a privilege in some cases, as mentioned before.
Yes, I think it's a privilege to stay at home. I think it's a wonderful thing to be stay-at-home mom, housewife. If your husband can support it, then yeah.
A privilege.
Okay. So
no, I want to hear what she has to say about it before we
think about
respond.
the fact that when we went around with both those questions, everybody said yes, women had to fight for the right to be able to get an education and have a career. And then everyone also said, but if you can stay home with your children, you are privileged. How could that be the case? How could it be both? How could it be that you had to fight, women had to fight and blaze a trail and a path to be able to work outside the home and have...
CheesePress Publishing takes ancient history from memorize and forget to investigate and discover. This is your history, raw, real, and ready to be explored. Dive into CheesePress Publishing's ancient history curriculum today, where history becomes a story you get to uncover. History that makes sense because it tells the whole story.
I don't even
know where to start unpacking that.
So I've got a whole...
So clearly this individual is not super well versed in history, because there is a difference between saying that a woman is as much of a human as a man versus one particular lifestyle is better than another. We are not that far removed from a woman not being able to own property, from a woman
account, a credit card,
being able to open a checking account.
I was a child when women were allowed to have credit cards. I was alive.
Understand that the feminist movement may have had unintended consequences because every major cultural shift always has unforeseen, unintended consequences. And it was a wild conversation because we had a conversation with a relative of mine when we were first establishing the organization that we run. And this relative of mine had been in the college admissions office for decades. And she had seen firsthand the push of the feminist movement through the 60s and 70s. And she had seen that transition, and we're sitting at lunch, and she said, the feminist movement is responsible for the decline in education. And we nearly fell out of our chairs.
I don't even remember it. I've blocked it.
But she went on to explain that what culturally was happening at that moment is when it became acceptable.
Were we at the Mexican restaurant over here?
No, we were up in Gainesville.
Sandwich shop.
When the feminist movement truly culturally took hold, when it was suddenly acceptable for women to have these other careers, not just your women's careers like teachers and nurses, all of the sudden, parents of young women, sending them to college, wanted their young women to become CEOs, to become lawyers, to become doctors. They refused to entertain any thought that their child should go on to be a teacher. Yeah. And so now this cultural shift means that your best and your brightest, previously, because the only career available to a woman was nursing, was teaching, so your best and your brightest were doing those jobs.
But some of those teachers ended up at NASA doing math, so...
No, that didn't suck. And
opposite, yeah.
No, it's not a condemnation of the feminist movement. That's not a condemnation of the idea that women should have equal rights to men, because they should. In case anybody was wondering, women and men should have the same rights to do whatever their choices are. But there are cultural shifts that result in unintended consequences. That's one of them. The unintended consequence that they're discussing here is now that it's acceptable for women to be as much a breadwinner as men, and because of the way that our economy has been for the last 30 years, and you have to have two incomes.
I hate that.
That's taken choice
the man
away.
and woman have to work. Because when I was coming up as an adult, when I say I'm coming up, when I'm going through my 20s and 30s with young children by my side,
right,
and people would find out that I homeschooled or that I was a stay-at-home mom, they would say, must be nice.
Right.
And they weren't kind about it.
No.
They were appalled and insulted
right,
that I had that privilege of being able to stay at home. I think I was out buying a table one day, and the man said, oh, it's almost 1 o'clock. Surely you have to get back to work. And I said, oh, I don't work. I spend my husband's money. He got mad. I was in this special skin. And so, no, that's another layer.
That is another layer.
Because the percentage of people in this special skin
who had that
have that privilege is much smaller.
Right.
And so I get that. But on the other hand, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be an artist and a teacher. And my parents wanted me to be a lawyer. So I get the whole thing. But does that make women being treated equal to men? Does that make the man in my life, me insisting that the man in my life treats me like a human, bad?
If you're this person, apparently, right? So, yes, it's absolutely a privilege. That's not a function of feminism. That's a function of our economy. Is the fact that that's a privilege is a function of living expenses and inflation and not being able to earn enough money to have a proper living wage.
My husband, I, and his older sister, and she's always been an executive, have always had this little conversations like, I don't want to work because I have to. I want to work because I want to. That's what women want to do. And we want to work because we want to.
The core of feminism is having the choice to exist as a human. Like every other human. Like it's having choices. And this discussion is talking about two different things. Because yes, girls and women should have the choice to be educated. They should have the choice to have a career. They should have a choice to be financially independent. They should have a choice as to whether they want to get married. They should have a choice as to whether they want to have children. They should have a choice as to whether they want to have children without being married. That's feminism is about choices. Because I did notice this is a fascinating panel.
They're beautiful.
To a person, they all envisioned a traditional relationship. Everyone said, if the man earns the money and the woman works, or, if my husband or if the father, or everyone envisioned a traditional relationship. That's just not how people are necessarily wired.
Yeah. Well, one woman got up and left. The black woman, I wanted to hear what she had to say.
Right? Would love to see her back and get a take here. But no, that's a complete and utter misunderstanding of what feminism is from a core and historical standpoint.
Yeah, it's pretty off. Is this it?
Mm-hmm.
Have their own money and careers, but also
she says it
if
so
you can
snotty.
stay home with your children, that you're privileged, because wouldn't they only have been fighting for the right to have careers and education if they were oppressed before when they were staying at home? By the way, I want to mention something else. In all my research, in every culture around the world, there has never been any law I'm aware of where women were expressly forbidden from working. So if you have this idea...
She has not done research. She does not know her history, because that is not a true statement.
There's also been a law that black women could not work.
There was.
Because when black men started making money and black women started staying home, there were states that made laws that black women had to go to work because white women didn't have maids.
Yep. No, there are absolutely cultures. God. There are modern cultures.
I'm dying.
There are historical cultures where a woman is the property of her father until she is married and then becomes the property of her husband.
If you've been paying attention to man talk and ManTube the last 3 or 4 years, did I just say that really weird?
I've not ever heard of this, but also I'm not on TikTok, but okay. Go on.
There's black TikTok. There's
I didn't know there was man talk. Okay.
You're seeing comments and videos that are saying that's why she needs to be at home. They need to send women back home. Da 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 da. If we are in a slippery slope right now.
Oh, we've had comments on our videos telling us that we have too much time on our hands and we need to get married.
Married 33 years this March, and 20-something years for you. So
yeah,
I'm working really hard to keep my fingers in check right now. I keep wanting to throw gang signs.
Yeah, okay.
The idea that women weren't allowed to work or women weren't allowed to be educated. There may be some countries like India where perhaps girls can't go to school, or parts of Africa.
She really doesn't know history, does she?
In Africa, there are people who will go to a girl's school, steal all the girls, and force marry them and other horrible things. Mm-hmm. Is she...
Well, no, she said in India, in Africa,
and perhaps maybe. Africa, maybe.
There are numerous historical records.
Actually, India is not that bad education-wise for girls, are they?
Depends on the part that you're in.
Okay.
Depends on the part that you're in. But there are documented cases of women dressing and passing as men so that they could go to schools for doctors, so that they could go to higher education, because women were barred from entry.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you purport to be doing research and not know this?
Because she's researching in her bubble.
But I'm mainly talking about the Western world in America where we all are.
You're talking to international girls. She's talking to international girls. And she just told them that their cultures don't matter because she's...
But also, it's the Western world that's happening.
Women have always been allowed to work. But before feminism and before the Industrial Revolution, it didn't make sense. Why? Because if you had the average woman in the year 1800 had 7 children, 7 births. Probably a few of them might not make it to adulthood. But if you had 7 births, why on earth would you want a career outside the house? I mean, why would you, what are you going to do, pay daycare for 7 kids? And here's the other thing. You guys are talking about women should have a career if they're going to be moms, and we can just pay daycare or have family.
They didn't say that.
But it's like,
well, this seems to be a clip from a larger
really
conversation.
Stupid. And here's why. Because how does it make sense for me to say, you know what, I'm a mom, but I deserve a career, and I'm ambitious, and I have career goals, and I need to be able to work. So I'm going to hire this other woman to come in and do the mothering for 8 or 9 hours a day while I'm gone. Well, what about that woman? She doesn't deserve a career? You're just...
That is a career!
Shifting the stuff over, right? So
there are women who are just really good at that. And if they can get paid for it, then good.
Do you guys think it's the same if dad stays home? Do you think that it's just as good if dad's staying home? If everybody did that, it'd be fine?
outside of my husband, the man I admire most in this world,
Yep.
and you know who I'm talking about.
No, and I agree, was a stay-at-home dad. Mm-hmm.
And so good at it.
And so good at it. And they're such a sweet family.
Can we address the entire question, or would you like us
Sure.
Okay.
Whatever you guys want to say, we can just kind of open it up.
So, I kind of see, I see what you're saying. It's kind of like we look like we want to have our cake and eat it too kind of concept. But it's more so, as I would say I think it is, that we fight to go to work so that we have money to pay bills, we have money to put food on the table and do things like that. That's why we get our jobs. But then we would also like to be at home and stay with our children and stuff like that. So I see it in your way, but then I also see it in mine. And your other question was, I'm sorry, about...
Well, do you think that it's the same if dad stays home? Because that was something that came up earlier in the panel. Because I don't remember which one of you said it to Andrew, but you were like,
That girl did not come
well,
back.
why can't the dad just stay
He
home?
was
Why does
not
it have to be
interested in this
me?
conversation.
Yeah.
Why
I
should
think
it be
this is a
mom
clip
that
from
stays
Larcher.
home, do you think?
Well, I think personally, the dad can stay home as well. I think either as long as there's a parent present, it's, great both ways.
So what do you think would happen if society-wide, let's say that, women are strong and they're rising, they're getting more college degrees than men are today, which, by the way, that's not very new. Women have had higher literacy rates and higher high school graduation rates in the United States since we started tracking those numbers in 1790.
Which makes
I can get to why later, but
1790.
I don't know that's accurate.
She just told on herself because she kept saying 100 years, and now we've been
Right.
tracking since 1790.
It's
I'm just pointing out her math is poor.
Also, I don't know that that's factually correct.
I know that now. I know that since the 1980s,
Yeah.
that black women have more and higher degrees than everyone else because no one takes us at face value that we're highly intelligent. So
Right.
we're degree stacking out here.
And I do know that there is a statistically significant higher rate of women getting college degrees right now than men.
I mean,
though I've seen research that says that that's a phenomenon that's come up in the last 10 to 15 years.
I don't know if it's 10 to 15 years because I was raised in poverty.
Right.
And so being raised in poverty was a real obvious.
Well, just when I was pulling those numbers, it was this shift has happened and what do we do about it?
But the shift happened with the poor before it happened with everybody else.
I have no
And
doubt.
so I witnessed in the 80s and 90s that all of the men in my family either left high school in 11th grade or got their diploma and then went to work because the responsibility to get your family out of poverty was to get a blue collar job immediately. And then you sent the girls in the family to school.
Right.
And so all the women in my family have degrees. And the only man in my family with a degree is my brother who went to the Army and got the GI Bill.
Right.
So
no, I just that I need to see where she's getting that data from.
That's just societal as we pamper girls a little bit more and we shelter them.
There is some of that, but then there's also that I need to prove myself that a guy straight out of high school can get hired to do something that they're not going to look at a woman to do it unless she's got that degree.
A black woman especially.
No, so there is that element of it. And there is a larger push to make sure that women are funded to get degrees in math and science and technology and stuff like that.
Our brothers were helping, and it makes me sad. It makes me kind of teary because I saw my brothers funding me and my sister's education.
Right.
Talking about privilege.
We shifted everything, and suddenly the next generation, 80% of the children are raised by the dads. The dads stay home and the moms go
That's
to work.
awesome.
Do you think that would work for society on a society-wide level? I see number 2 shaking her head no. Why do you think that might not work?
Because I believe that if your kid is raised from a mother or a father, it's different. There's some stuff that a mother can't provide that a father can provide, but there's also a lot of stuff that a father can't provide that a mother can.
That's true, but it's even simpler than that. Do you know what the top 20 most important and dangerous jobs are? If you look at job statistics, the top 20 jobs that we need the most, that are most important to keeping this whole infrastructure running. So you guys are all sitting here in a studio, there's lights, there's camera, it's a concrete building. You're up on the, you're up in this building with windows and there's electricity. We have internet, right? All this infrastructure is built by men. So all of the stuff you need to keep society running, logging, engineering, concrete mixing and laying.
I'm sure that statistically there are more men in construction than women. That doesn't mean that a woman can't do it.
Everything infrastructure related, those are the most dangerous, the most difficult, and the most important jobs. And they are occupied by anywhere from 80 to 99% men. If you look at concrete work, it's 99.8% men. Women don't lay concrete. Do you think that society would keep going if we had all the concrete layers at home raising the kids? What if all of the men who run the telecommunications, your cell phone, your Wi-Fi,
the logical fallacies at play
here? What if all
here?
the men who build those systems, fix them when they go down? What if they were all at home raising babies?
What does that have anything to do with anything?
There's enough men.
We just had this massive bunch of hurricanes in the southeast and knocked out the power to all of Appalachia.
A 40-year-old man is at home raising a baby. A 20-year-old man's on the pole.
All the people who go in there and rebuild that.
That didn't sound right at all.
And rebuild everything, that's all men.
So
So what do you think would happen if we had an economy where all the women went to work and the men stayed home? Do you know what the top 20 jobs occupied by women are? They're the same top 20 jobs occupied by women 100 years ago. So if you look at the top 20 most female jobs in 1920 and the top 20 most female jobs in 2020, they're almost exactly
What
the same.
are they?
All we did was swap HR and farm work. So more women did small-time farm work back then, and more of them do HR now. But other than that, women are early childhood educators, teachers, nurses, bookkeeping, retail workers, food service industry workers, things like that. So men and women are not interchangeable. Moms and dads are not interchangeable. So this idea that, I can be a strong, independent boss, babe, and I'll just outsource the child care, or dad can just stay home. You could argue that that's fine on some individual levels, but if we make this the society-wide expectation, everything that allows you girls to think that you are strong, independent boss babes who can do it on your own crumbles. It disappears. It turns to dust. There's no more Wi-Fi. There's no more electricity. Kiss your air conditioning goodbye. There's nobody to fix your car when it breaks. You don't have gasoline because there's no oil rig workers getting.
All right, that's the end of the video.
She ain't schooled nobody, nothing.
She didn't school nobody,
She
nothing.
turned off some beautiful women from homeschooling.
Potentially.
Because now they think that homeschoolers are closed-minded.
I don't know who she thinks she schooled about anything. That was wild. The entire premise, that whole rant at the end comes back to what we were talking about earlier. This woman doesn't understand what feminism is.
No.
Because all of those logical fallacies go away when you understand that what feminism is women are humans and deserve human rights. Period. End of story. That's feminism. Mm-hmm. It's not women can do everything that men can do. It's not men can do everything women can do. It's not women should be making all of the decisions. It's not women should be making none of the decisions. It's women are human beings and deserve human rights and should be able to do whatever it is that they want to do, just like a man can.
Yeah.
That's it. And if you don't understand the fundamental premise, then
you shouldn't be at home teaching children.
Right?
Because now we're having another generation
of nonsense. I had such high hopes for this panel of young ladies. I was fascinated to hear what they said, and they did not even have an opportunity to speak to anything, really. Yeah. She sat there and she lectured this panel of young ladies, and they all look completely bored.
Well, they look picked on.
That too, with the tone that she was using and the way that she was phrasing everything. And I don't know that anything that she said was factually true. Not 100%. There were grains of truth in some of it.
I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research on these young ladies, but this looks like that intersection between, because you see the boss babe comes up a lot, and so she used that term, so she was coming at them. It's some intersection between boss babes and trad wives.
That is kind of what
boss babe, future trad wife.
Till next time.